In the shadowy underworld of New York City, silence is usually the best policy, but a secret signal can be the difference between life and death. When Elena, a struggling waitress at the city's most exclusive mob front, noticed a glint of steel beneath a customer's jacket, she didn't scream or run. Instead, she walked straight into the lion's den, delivering a silent, coded message to Lorenzo Moretti, the most feared Don on the East Coast. That split-second decision didn't just save a life. It ignited a brutal war and revealed a past Elena had buried deep. What Lorenzo did next shocked everyone and proved that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one holding the gun, but the one serving the wine. The air inside Vino and Veritas always smelled of expensive cologne truffles and suppressed violence. It was a scent Elena had grown accustomed to over the last 6 months, a sensory warning that kept her spine rigid and her eyes lowered. To the rest of Manhattan, this was a 5-star Italian establishment on the Upper East Side, a place where senators dined with Wall Street sharks. But to the staff, and to anyone who knew the real architecture of power in the city, it was the throne room of the Moretti crime family. Elena adjusted the white apron around her waist, her fingers lingering on the coarse fabric. She was 24, with tired eyes that had seen too much for her age, and hands that were steady even when her heart hammered against her ribs. She needed this job. The tips were cash off the books, and essential for keeping her younger brother Leo in his specialized school upstate. That need was the only reason she tolerated the way the floor manager, a greasy man named Carlo, snapped his fingers at her like she was a stray dog. "Table 4, Carlo hissed, shoving a tray of vintage Barolo into her hands. "Don't mess it up. The boss is in tonight." The boss, Lorenzo Enzo Moretti. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees whenever he walked through the heavy oak doors. He was a man carved from marble and ice, with dark hair swept back and eyes the color of a stormy sea, beautiful but promising a drowning. He didn't just walk. He occupied space with a predator's lethargy. Tonight, he was seated at the corner booth, the one with the best sight lines of the entrance and the kitchen. Elena took a breath, centering herself. She had learned the art of invisibility growing up. Her father, a man she rarely spoke of, had taught her that. Be the wallpaper, Elena. Be the dust motes in the light. If they don't see you, they can't hurt you. She approached table 4. Lorenzo was not alone. Sitting opposite him was a man who looked like he had been chewed up and spat out by a concrete mixer. It was Declan the Butcher O'Malley, the head of the Irish syndicate, trying to muscle in on the Hell's Kitchen ports. The meeting was supposed to be a truce. "Gentlemen," Elena said softly, her voice a practiced, neutral tone. "The Barolo 2015. Lorenzo didn't look up. He was busy dissecting O'Malley, with a stare that could peel paint. "Pour," he commanded, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the table. As Elena uncorked the bottle, her movements precise, she watched O'Malley. The Irishman was sweating despite the cool air conditioning. His hands were twitchy, tapping a chaotic rhythm on the tablecloth. But it wasn't his hands that caught Elena's attention. It was the man standing behind him. O'Malley's bodyguard, a looming figure in a cheap suit that didn't fit right around the chest. Elena poured the wine into Lorenzo's glass. As she turned to pour for O'Malley, the bodyguard shifted his weight. The movement caused his jacket to flare open just an inch. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Most people were too busy looking at the faces, the eyes, the posturing. But Elena had been trained to look at the negative space. She saw the matte black handle of a suppressed pistol tucked not in a shoulder holster, but shoved into the waistband, positioned for a cross draw, a shooter's draw. More alarming was the subtle nod the bodyguard gave to the busboy, clearing the next table. The busboy, a new guy named Ricky, who had started 3 days ago, reached into his bus tub. His hand didn't come out with a dirty plate. It stayed there, gripping something beneath a pile of linen napkins. It wasn't a truce. It was a pincer move, an execution. Elena's heart slammed against her throat. If she did nothing, Lorenzo Moretti would be dead in 30 seconds. If she screamed, the shooting would start instantly, and she'd likely catch a stray bullet. She finished pouring O'Malley's wine. She had to act. But how? She couldn't just speak. O'Malley would shoot her before she got the words out. She needed a code, a signal, something that a man like Lorenzo Moretti, a man raised in the old ways of Cosa Nostra, would recognize instinctively. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The service of treason, Elena. Remember it. If the cup is placed with the left hand, it means friendship. If the cup is turned 3 times, it means poison. But if you spill the salt... No spilling salt was too clumsy. She needed something sharper. She remembered a story her father told her about the Moretti family specifically. They had a paranoid obsession with the placement of silverware. It was an old Sicilian check. Elena took a step back. She grabbed the silver water pitcher. She moved to Lorenzo's side. As she filled his water glass, she deliberately loudly knocked his heavy silver fork off the napkin. It clattered onto the china plate with a piercing ring that cut through the low murmur of the restaurant. Silence rippled outward from the table. "Clumsy bitch," O'Malley sneered, reaching for his wine. But Elena didn't apologize. She didn't cower. She met Lorenzo's gaze dead on. With her right hand, she placed the fork back down. But she didn't place it parallel to the knife. She placed it perpendicular, the tines facing strictly toward O'Malley. And then she tapped the tablecloth twice with her index finger. Tap, tap, right next to the knife blade. The cross and the tap. In the old language of the overarching families, it meant enemy at the gate. Weapon drawn. Time seemed to suspend. Lorenzo looked at the fork. Then he looked at her finger. His eyes snapped up to hers. For a fraction of a second, the mask of the Don slipped, revealing genuine shock. He recognized it. He understood. He didn't hesitate. Lorenzo smiled a terrifying wolfish grin that didn't reach his eyes. "The wine is excellent," he said to O'Malley, "but I think the service here is about to get very messy." He moved. The explosion of violence was so fast it blurred. Lorenzo didn't reach for a weapon. He kicked the heavy oak table upward. The table flipped, sending china crystal and the expensive Barolo crashing into O'Malley and his bodyguard. The heavy edge of the table caught O'Malley under the chin with a sickening crunch. "Down!" Lorenzo roared. Elena was already dropping. She scrambled backward, hitting the floor, just as the air filled with the suppressed thwip, thwip, thwip of bullets. The bodyguard knocked off balance, but still active, was firing blindly through the overturned table. Simultaneously, Ricky the busboy whipped a sawed-off shotgun from his tub. But before he could level it, Marco Lorenzo's second-in-command, who had been sitting at the bar pretending to read a newspaper, put 2 rounds into Ricky's chest with a precision that was almost mechanical. Screams erupted. Patrons dove under tables. Glass shattered everywhere. Elena crawled toward the service station, her knees scraping against broken shards. She needed to get to the exit. This wasn't her world, she was just the help. She had signaled the danger, she had done her part. Now she needed to survive. She reached the swinging kitchen doors, but a hand clamped around her ankle like a steel trap. She gasped, kicking out, but the grip was unbreakable. She was dragged back, sliding across the polished floor, until she was pulled behind the cover of the overturned mahogany bar. She looked up into the furious, exhilarated face of Lorenzo Moretti. He was crouching over her, a sleek silver pistol in his hand. He wasn't looking at her, though. He was firing over the bar, suppressing the remaining O'Malley soldiers near the entrance. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Don't move an inch." "I need to go," Eleanor hissed, adrenaline making her bold. "My shift is over." Lorenzo actually laughed, a dark, harsh sound. He ducked as a bullet shattered a row of vodka bottles above their heads, raining alcohol and glass down on them. "Your shift just started, ragazza. You don't drop a call of the Black Hand signal and then clock out." The gunfire began to taper off. The Moretti soldiers, better trained and better armed, had secured the room. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. It was the silence of the aftermath. Lorenzo stood up, dusting glass off his tailored suit. He walked around the bar, stepping over the body of a hitman, and surveyed the room. "Marco," he barked. "Boss," Marco replied, holstering his weapon. He was a bald giant of a man, efficient and brutal. "Room is clear. Police will be here in 4 minutes. We need to vanish." "Clean the tapes," Lorenzo ordered. "Leave the Irishmen where they fell. Let the message be clear." Then Lorenzo turned his attention back to Elena. She was standing up now, shaking, wiping blood from a small cut on her cheek. She looked ready to bolt. Lorenzo closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but with a possessiveness that made her breath hitch. He pulled her close, staring into her face as if trying to solve a complex equation. "Who are you?" he demanded softly. "I'm Elena. I'm just a waitress," she lied, her voice trembling. "Bullshit," Lorenzo whispered. He leaned in his face inches from hers. She could smell the gunpowder and the expensive wine on him. "A waitress drops a plate when she's scared. A waitress screams. You didn't scream. You gave me the croce di ferro. That is a signal that hasn't been used in New York since the 90s. Since the days of the old families." He tightened his grip slightly. "Who taught you that?" "I read it in a book," she stammered. "Liar." He stared at her for another second, his eyes searching hers. "You saved my life, Elena. That puts me in your debt, and a Moretti always pays his debts, but it also makes you a target." "I don't want your debt," Elena said, trying to pull her arm away. "I just want to go home." "You can't go home," Lorenzo said grimly. "O'Malley has brothers, vicious ones. They saw you. They saw you tip me off. If you walk out that door alone, you'll be dead by morning." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She knew he was right. The O'Malleys were known for their scorched earth revenge tactics. "Marco," Lorenzo called out without looking away from Elena. "Bring the car around. The ghost protocol." "Boss, you can't be serious," Marco protested, walking over. "She's a civilian. We can't take her to the safe haven." "She's not a civilian," Lorenzo said, his eyes locking onto Elena's with an intensity that burned. "She's an asset, and she's coming with us." "I have a brother," Elena blurted out, panic rising. "I have to pick up Leo. I can't leave him." Lorenzo paused. "Where is he?" "St. Jude's boarding school. Upstate." Lorenzo nodded once. "Marco, send a team to St. Jude's. Secure the boy. Bring him to the safe haven." "No," Elena shouted. "Don't you dare touch him." Lorenzo grabbed her shoulders, shaking her once hard. "Listen to me. The O'Malleys will find out everything about you in an hour. Your address, your family, your brother. If my men don't get to him first, they will. Do you want the Irish to find your brother?" The reality of his words hit her like a physical blow. She slumped, defeated. "No," she whispered. "Then get in the car," Lorenzo said, steering her toward the back exit as the sirens wailed in the distance. As they burst out into the cool night air of the alleyway, a black armored SUV screeched to a halt in front of them. Elena was shoved into the back seat, Lorenzo sliding in right beside her. As the car tore away, merging into the New York traffic, Elena looked out the window. Her old life, the apron, the tips, the anonymity was gone. She turned to look at Lorenzo. He was on his phone, barking orders in rapid-fire Italian. He glanced at her, and for a moment, the hardness in his eyes softened. "You made a choice back there, Elena," he said quietly. "You stepped into the game. Now you have to play it until the end." Elena clenched her fists. She hadn't just stepped into the game. She had just become the most valuable piece on the board. And she had a secret that Lorenzo Moretti couldn't know. The signal she used wasn't just something she knew. It was something she was born into. Lorenzo thought he had saved a waitress. He had no idea he had just abducted the daughter of the man who tried to kill his father 20 years ago. The safe haven wasn't a bunker or a warehouse. It was the penthouse of the Millennium Spire, a residential fortress overlooking Central Park. The elevator opened directly into a living room that cost more than Elena would earn in 10 lifetimes. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights, a glittering ocean of electricity that felt a million miles away from the chaos of the restaurant. Elena stood in the center of the room, hugging her arms around herself. She was still wearing her waitress uniform, now stained with wine and dust. She felt ridiculously out of place against the modern art and Italian leather furniture. Lorenzo had been silent during the ride, his focus entirely on his phone, coordinating the fallout of the shooting. Now he tossed his jacket onto a chair and poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. He didn't offer her one. "My men have your brother," Lorenzo said, turning to face her. "He is safe. He's being taken to a separate location in the Hamptons. My mother is there. She loves children. He will be treated like a prince." "I want to see him," Elena said, her voice steady despite her fear. "In due time," Lorenzo replied, taking a sip of the amber liquid. He walked toward her, circling her slowly like a shark, inspecting fresh bait. "First we talk. The truth." He leaned against a marble pillar, crossing his arms. "I ran a background check on you in the car. Elena Rossi, 24 years old. Parents deceased in a car accident in 2015. No criminal record, just a struggling waitress trying to pay tuition for a special needs brother." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "It's a very clean story. Too clean." Elena kept her face impassive. "It's the truth." "It's a cover," Lorenzo countered smoothly. "The signal you used, the Croce di Ferro, that is specific to the Genovese crime family tactics from the 90s. Specifically, the inner circle of Don Salvo." Elena's heart skipped a beat at the name. Don Salvo. Her grandfather. "I don't know who that is," she lied. "My father was a history buff. He liked codes. He taught me things as a game when I was little." Lorenzo stepped closer, invading her personal space. He reached out and touched her chin, tilting her head up. His fingers were warm, rough, calloused skin against her soft jaw. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her that she hadn't expected. "You have the eyes of a soldier, Elena," he murmured. "Not a waitress. You saw the gun when my own security missed it. You saw the busboy. You calculated the angles." He dropped his hand and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "There is a rat in my organization. Someone told O'Malley I would be at that table tonight. Someone cleared the way for that busboy to get a shotgun in the tub." He turned back to her, his expression deadly serious. "I can't trust my men right now. But you are an outsider who saved my life. That makes you the only variable I can trust." "What do you want from me?" Elena asked. "I need you to remember everything you saw tonight. The bodyguard, the busboy. Did you see anyone else? Did anyone make eye contact with them? Did you see anyone on my staff give a signal? Elena closed her eyes, replaying the scene. She had a photographic memory, another gift from her father's training. She visualized the dining room, the layout, the faces. The maitre d', she said, opening her eyes. Paolo. Lorenzo frowned. Paolo has been with me for 10 years. When O'Malley walked in, Elena said, her voice gaining confidence. Paolo didn't check the bodyguard's coat. He usually pats down everyone who isn't family. He tapped the bodyguard on the left shoulder. 2 taps. Lorenzo's face darkened. 2 taps. The all clear. And, Elena continued, just before the shooting started, Paolo went to the kitchen. He didn't come back out. He knew it was coming. Lorenzo slammed his glass down on the table, shattering it. Paolo. The name was a curse. He's the one who hired me, Elena added softly. He asked a lot of questions about you last week, when you would be coming in, which table you preferred. Lorenzo paced the room, a caged tiger. If Paolo is the traitor, then the rot goes deep. He runs the logistics for the entire East Side. He stopped and looked at Elena. You just gave me the name of the traitor. You saved me twice in one night. Does this mean I can go? Elena asked, hope rising. No, Lorenzo said. It means you're in deeper. If Paolo is the traitor, he knows you saw him. He knows you're the loose end. He will come for you, and he knows where you live. Lorenzo walked over to a secure panel on the wall and punched in a code. A hidden compartment opened, revealing a row of handguns and stacks of cash. He pulled out a small, sleek Glock 43 and a burner phone. He walked back to Elena and held them out. Take them, he ordered. Elena hesitated. I don't use guns. You do now, Lorenzo said. This is a war, Elena, and you are under my protection. But I cannot be everywhere. You need to be able to finish what you started. She took the cold metal of the gun. It felt heavy, but familiar. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12 in the woods behind their cabin in Jersey. Aim for the center mass, Ellie. Breathe out, then squeeze. Tonight, you sleep here, Lorenzo said, his voice softer now. In the guest suite. Tomorrow, we go on the offensive. We are going to find Paolo, and you are going to help me break him. Why me? She whispered. Lorenzo looked at her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of genuine admiration in his eyes. Because, Elena, you're the only one who saw the Viper before it struck, and I have a feeling you have more secrets than just a napkin code. He walked past her toward the hallway, pausing at the door. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we hunt. Elena stood alone in the penthouse, the gun heavy in her hand. She walked to the window and looked at her reflection in the glass. She looked the same, but she wasn't. The waitress was gone. The daughter of the Rossi bloodline had returned. She checked the magazine of the Glock with a practiced motion, the click-clack sound echoing in the silent room. If Lorenzo Moretti wanted a hunt, she would give him one. But he had better pray he never found out that the woman helping him hunt the traitor was the granddaughter of his family's greatest enemy. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Millennium Spire penthouse, but it brought no warmth to the room. The air was still thick with the tension of the previous night's violence. Elena had barely slept. She had spent the hours sitting on the edge of the king-sized bed in the guest suite, the Glock 43 resting on the nightstand like a dormant viper. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw O'Malley's bodyguard reaching for his gun and the terrifying, calculated precision of Lorenzo Moretti's response. She walked out into the main living area. The room was empty of people, but full of activity. 3 men in dark tactical gear were setting up a mobile command center On the dining table, laptops, satellite phones, and maps of the city. Marco was there speaking in low, urgent tones into a headset, but her eyes went straight to Lorenzo. He was standing on the balcony, braving the morning chill in just a white dress shirt and slacks, a cigarette burning between his fingers. He looked like a king, surveying a kingdom that was slowly catching fire. Elena approached the glass door. She hesitated, then slid it open. The wind whipped her hair across her face. "You're awake," Lorenzo said, without turning around. "Coffee is on the counter. Colombian. Strong." "I don't need coffee. I need to know where my brother is," Elena said, stepping onto the balcony. The height was dizzying. Central Park looked like a green patch on a grey quilt. Lorenzo turned. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with the fatigue of a man who hadn't slept, but his gaze was sharp. "Leo is at the estate in the Hamptons. My mother sent a photo this morning. He's eating pancakes and playing with the dogs. He thinks you're on a double shift catering a wedding." He held out his phone. On the screen was a picture of Leo grinning, a golden retriever licking his cheek. Elena felt a knot in her chest loosen, followed immediately by a wave of guilt. She was lying to him. Again. "Thank you," she whispered, handing the phone back. "Don't thank me yet," Lorenzo said, flicking the cigarette ash over the railing. "We found Paolo." Elena stiffened. "Where? He didn't go to ground. He's arrogant. He went to a private gambling den in Queens to collect a debt before skipping town. A place called the Iron Vault. It's a neutral zone for low-level criminals." "So we send Marco to pick him up," Elena said. "No." Lorenzo crushed the cigarette butt under his heel. "Marco is too recognizable. If he walks in, Paolo runs out the back. And the Iron Vault is a labyrinth. We need someone to walk in, get eyes on him, and flush him out to the alley where my team will be waiting." He looked at her. The implication was heavy in the air. "You want me to go in?" Elena said flatly. "You're the only face he doesn't fear yet," Lorenzo explained. "To him, you're just the waitress who got lucky. He doesn't know you're with me. He thinks you ran away. And if he sees me, you tell him you're looking for hush money. You tell him you saw everything and you want a payout to keep your mouth shut. He's greedy. He'll bite. And then you lead him outside." Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register, "and I handle the rest." 2 hours later, Eleanor sat in the passenger seat of a nondescript Honda Civic, a car chosen to blend in. Lorenzo was driving, wearing a baseball cap and a faded jacket, looking nothing like the Don of the Moretti family. They parked 2 blocks away from the Iron Vault. It was an unassuming brick building under the rattle of the elevated subway tracks. "Earwig in," Lorenzo instructed, handing her a tiny communication device. Elena placed it in her ear. "Check. I'll be listening. If anything feels wrong, if he has friends, if he touches you, say the word checkmate, and I'm coming in through the front door with everything I have." Elena looked at him. For a ruthless crime boss, he was surprisingly protective. Or maybe he just didn't want to lose his star witness. "I can handle myself," she said, checking the Glock tucked into the back of her waistband, hidden under her oversized denim jacket. "I know you can," Lorenzo said. He reached out his hand, hovering over hers for a second, before he pulled back. "Just be careful, Elena." She got out of the car and walked toward the building. The bouncer was a slab of muscle with a bored expression. "Password," he grunted. "Blue velvet." Elena said a phrase Marco had extracted from one of Paolo's associates earlier that morning. The bouncer nodded and opened the heavy steel door. The inside of the Iron Vault was a sensory assault. Smoke hung low in the air, mixing with the smell of cheap beer and desperation. Slot machines chimed in the corners, but the real action was at the poker tables in the center. Elena scanned the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She kept her head down, moving through the crowd. She spotted him in the back corner booth. Paolo. The usually impeccable maitre d' looked disheveled. His tie was loose, his eyes darting around the room nervously. He was arguing with a man in a leather jacket, gesturing at a duffel bag on the floor. Elena took a deep breath. She had to channel the terrified, greedy girl Lorenzo thought she was. She couldn't show the Rossi steel. Not yet. She approached the table. Paolo, she said, her voice trembling just the right amount. Paolo spun around. His eyes went wide with shock, then narrowed into suspicion. He waved the man in the leather jacket away. Elena. What the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be dead. I ran, Elena stammered. I saw what happened. I saw you leave the kitchen. Paolo stood up, grabbing her arm and pulling her into the booth. Keep your voice down, you stupid girl. I want money, Elena hissed, pulling her arm back. I know you set up Mr. Moretti. I saw you signal the busboy. I'll go to the police unless you pay me. Paolo laughed, a cruel, wet sound. The police are on O'Malley's payroll, sweetheart. But you have guts. He looked her up and down, a predatory gleam in his eyes. How much? 50,000, Elena said. Cash, right now. Paolo smirked. I don't have that kind of cash on me, but I have it in the car out back. Come with me. Bingo. Fine, Elena said. Paolo stood up, grabbing his duffel bag. He placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the rear exit. Elena felt her skin crawl, but she endured it. Lorenzo, we're moving, she whispered barely audibly. I see you. Lorenzo's voice crackled in her ear. I'm at the back exit. Wait until you're outside. They pushed through the rear fire exit into a narrow, garbage-strewn alleyway. The rain had started again, a cold drizzle that slicked the cobblestones. Where's the car? Elena asked, stopping in the middle of the alley. Paolo stopped too. He dropped the duffel bag. He wasn't reaching for keys. He was reaching into his jacket. There is no car, Elena, Paolo sneered. You really thought you could blackmail me? You're just a loose end. He pulled out a revolver. Drop it, Paolo, Lorenzo's voice boomed from the shadows. Lorenzo stepped out from behind a dumpster, his gun leveled at Paolo's chest. Marco appeared on the fire escape above a rifle trained on the Traitor. Paolo froze. His face went pale. Boss, wait. I can explain. You sold me out to the Irish. Lorenzo walked forward, the rain soaking his clothes. For what money power? For survival, Paolo shouted, backing up. You don't understand, Enzo. It's not just the Irish. O'Malley is just a pawn. They're coming for everyone. Who is coming? Lorenzo demanded, stepping closer. Suddenly the back door of the club burst open again. The man in the leather jacket, the one Paolo was arguing with, stepped out, but he wasn't alone. 3 other men with submachine guns poured out behind him. Ambush! Marco yelled from above, opening fire. Chaos erupted. Bullets sparked against the brick walls. Lorenzo dove behind a stack of pallets, pulling Elena down with him. Paolo scrambled toward the shooters, screaming, Help me! They found me! But the newcomers didn't help Paolo. The man in the leather jacket raised his weapon and fired a burst into Paolo's back. The traitor crumpled to the wet ground, silenced before he could reveal the truth. They're cleaning house, Lorenzo yelled, returning fire. Elena, stay down. But the angle was bad. The shooters were advancing, pinning Lorenzo and Elena behind the pallets. Marco was suppressed by heavy fire from the doorway. One of the gunmen began to flank them, moving along the wall to get a clear shot at Lorenzo's exposed side. Lorenzo didn't see him. He was focused on the main group. Elena saw him. The old instinct took over. The trembling waitress vanished. In her place was the girl who had spent her childhood stripping AK-47s blindfolded in her grandfather's study. Elena drew the Glock 43 from her waistband. She didn't hesitate. She didn't close her eyes. She rolled out from behind the cover, assuming a perfect Weaver stance. Pop, pop. 2 shots. Center mass. The flanking gunman dropped instantly, his weapon clattering to the ground. Lorenzo whipped his head around, shock registering on his face even in the heat of battle. He looked at the dead gunman, then at Elena. She wasn't shaking. She was scanning for the next target, her finger indexed along the slide, her breathing controlled. "Cover me!" she yelled at Lorenzo, a command, not a plea. Lorenzo blinked, then grinned fiercely. "Covering!" He laid down suppressive fire, forcing the remaining gunman back into the club. Marco took the opportunity to drop a flashbang grenade from the fire escape. Boom! White light filled the alley. "Move!" Lorenzo grabbed Elena's hand, and they sprinted down the alley toward the Honda Civic. They dove into the car, Lorenzo slamming it into reverse and peeling out just as bullets shattered the rear windshield. They sped away, tires screeching, leaving the carnage behind. Lorenzo drove for 3 blocks in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, he pulled the car into a quiet side street and killed the engine. He turned to look at her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a heavy, dangerous silence in the small car. "Who are you?" Lorenzo asked, his voice low and intense. "And don't tell me you learned that in a book. You double-tapped a moving target at 20 yards with a compact pistol. That's military grade. That's hitman grade." Elena stared straight ahead, her chest heaving. She knew she had messed up. She had shown her hand. "I told you," she said quietly. "I had to survive." "Who trained you, Elena?" Lorenzo reached out, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at him. "Who are you really? Does it matter?" she whispered, looking into his storm-grey eyes. "I just saved your life. Again." Lorenzo stared at her, the suspicion warring with an undeniable magnetic attraction. The smell of rain gunpowder and her perfume filled the car. "It matters," he said softly, "because if you're not who you say you are, I have to kill you, and right now, that is the last thing I want to do." He leaned in the distance between them, closing to nothing. It was a moment balancing on the edge of a knife violence or passion. Elena didn't pull away. She was terrified of him, and yet in the chaos, he was the only solid thing in her world. "Then don't ask," she breathed. Lorenzo hesitated. Then he cursed softly in Italian and pulled back, starting the car. "We need to go," he said, his voice rough. "Paolo is dead." But he said something before he died. "The syndicate. We have a bigger problem than O'Malley." As the car merged back into traffic, Elena looked out the window, her hand trembling now that the danger was over. She had bought herself some time. But the questions wouldn't stop, and the closer she got to Lorenzo, the harder it would be to keep the ghost of Don Salvo in the grave. The ride back to the Millennium Spire was a blur of neon lights and heavy silence. When they arrived, Marco was waiting, looking grim. He had a bandage wrapped around his forearm, a graze from the alley fight. "Boss," Marco said, as they stepped out of the elevator. "We have a problem. We retrieved Paolo's phone before we left. It's encrypted, but the last message he received wasn't from O'Malley. It was from a number traced to a shell company in Zurich." Lorenzo walked to the bar and poured 2 stiff drinks. He handed one to Elena without asking. Her hands were still steady, but her eyes were haunted. He watched her for a moment, trying to reconcile the waitress who spilled wine with the woman who executed a flanker in a Queen's alley. "Zurich," Lorenzo mused, taking a sip of whiskey. "That's neutral ground. Bankers. consultants. The message, Marco continued, was a set of coordinates and a time, tonight, midnight. Where? The Brooklyn Navy Yard, Dry Dock 4. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. That's abandoned. Used to be a drop point for the Russian mob, but they cleared out years ago. It's a meeting, Elena said, speaking up from the couch where she had collapsed. Paolo was trying to buy his way out. He was selling something. Lorenzo looked at her. What could a maitre d' have that is worth buying? Information, Elena said. He heard everything. Every conversation at table 4, every deal you made, every weakness in your organization. Lorenzo slammed his glass down. He was selling the keys to the kingdom. If there's a meeting tonight, Marco said, we need to be there. But it's a trap. It has to be. It's definitely a trap, Lorenzo agreed. But we're going anyway. Because whoever is on the other end of that meeting is the one pulling the strings. O'Malley is just the hammer. I want the hand that holds it. He turned to Elena. You're staying here. No, Elena said, standing up. The whiskey burned her throat, but it gave her courage. I'm coming. Absolutely not, Lorenzo snapped. You pushed your luck in the alley. I'm not taking you into a potential kill box. You need me, Elena argued, walking toward him. You said it yourself. I notice things. I see the details you miss. And, she paused, playing her ace card, I can speak Russian. Lorenzo froze. You speak Russian? My mother was Ukrainian. She lied smoothly. It was a half-truth. Her grandmother was, and the Rossi family insisted on multilingual education for all their children. If the Russians are involved, or if this Zurich contact uses intermediaries, you need a translator who isn't one of your men, someone they won't suspect. Lorenzo studied her face, searching for a crack in her armor. Italian, English, and Russian. You are a woman of many talents, Elena Rossi. I'm a survivor, she said. Let me help you end this. Then I get my brother and I disappear. Lorenzo didn't like it. His gut told him to lock her in the panic room. But his tactical mind knew she was right. If they were walking into a negotiation, a translator was a valid cover. Fine, he said, but you wear a wire, and you wear a vest. If the shooting starts, you drop and you don't move. No heroics this time. The Brooklyn Navy Yard was a graveyard of industry. Rusted cranes loomed like skeletal giants against the cloudy night sky. The air smelled of salt water and decaying metal. Lorenzo's convoy, 3 black SUVs, stopped at the perimeter. They proceeded on foot, moving silently through the shadows of the warehouses. Lorenzo, Marco, and Elena moved toward Dry Dock 4. Elena was dressed in black tactical pants and a turtleneck, a Kevlar vest tight against her chest. She felt like she was back in her father's training drills, moving through the dark, watching the sightlines. At the edge of the dock, a single black limousine was parked under the yellow glare of a floodlight. 2 men in grey suits stood by the hood. They didn't look like street thugs. They looked like military contractors. Precise, disciplined. Mercenaries, Lorenzo whispered. High-end. He signaled Marco to hold position with the sniper team. Elena with me. They stepped out into the light. The wind off the East River was biting. The 2 men watched them approach. They didn't reach for weapons. Mr. Moretti, one of the men said. His accent was thick, but it wasn't Russian. It was something else. German-Austrian, you are early. I don't like to keep secrets waiting. Lorenzo replied, his voice calm. Where is the buyer? The rear window of the limousine rolled down. A face appeared, an older man, silver hair, wearing spectacles. He looked like a university professor. Mr. Moretti, the man said softly. I am the accountant. I represent the consortium. The consortium, Lorenzo repeated. Never heard of you. We prefer it that way. The accountant smiled. We are interested in stability. Your war with O'Malley is disruptive to our shipping interests. We hired Paolo to facilitate a change in management, a more peaceful transition. You mean my assassination, Lorenzo said. Business is business. The accountant shrugged. But Paolo failed, and O'Malley is a blunt instrument, so I am here to make you a counteroffer. Surrender your territories in the harbor, and we will allow you to retire. Alive. Lorenzo laughed. It was a cold, terrifying sound that echoed off the metal hulls of the ships. You think I will give you my city because you asked nicely. We are not asking, the accountant said. He snapped his fingers. From the shadows of the warehouse behind them, a dozen red laser dots appeared on Lorenzo's chest. Snipers. We have you checkmated, Mr. Moretti, the accountant said. Sign the transfer papers, or you die here. Elena's heart stopped. There were too many. Even with Marco's team, they were outgunned. She looked at the accountant. There was something familiar about him. Not his face, but a ring on his finger. A gold signet ring with a double-headed eagle. Her breath hitched. She knew that crest. It wasn't a random criminal organization. It was the Iron Circle, an old rival of the Genovese family. They were the ones who had killed her uncle. And she knew their protocol. They won't shoot, Elena whispered to Lorenzo. Lorenzo kept his eyes on the accountant. What? It's a negotiation tactic, Elena murmured, barely moving her lips. The lasers are for show. If they wanted you dead, you'd be dead already. They need your signature to legitimize the port transfer. Without it, the unions won't recognize the new owners. Lorenzo trusted her. In that moment, surrounded by death, he decided to bet everything on the Waitress. I decline, Lorenzo said loudly. The accountant's smile faltered. You choose death. I choose war, Lorenzo said. He raised his hand. That was the signal. Marco's team, positioned on the cranes above, opened fire. But they didn't shoot the mercenaries. They shot out the floodlights. Crash! The dock plunged into darkness. Move! Lorenzo grabbed Elena, and they sprinted toward a stack of shipping containers. Gunfire erupted blindly into the dark. The mercenaries were shouting orders, confused by the sudden loss of vision. Lorenzo and Elena slid behind a rusted container. Lorenzo was breathing hard, a wild energy radiating from him. You were right. He grinned in the dark. They hesitated. They're bureaucrats with guns, Elena said, pulling her Glock. But they will regroup. We need to leave. Not yet, Lorenzo said. I want the accountant. He's in an armored limo, Elena said. You can't get him. Watch me. Lorenzo pulled a flare gun from his belt. He didn't aim at the limo. He aimed at a fuel drum sitting near the edge of the dock right next to where the limo was parked. He fired. The red flare streaked through the darkness. It hit the drum. Kaboom! A massive fireball illuminated the night. The force of the explosion flipped the heavy limousine onto its side like a toy. Now we go, Lorenzo yelled. They ran back toward the perimeter, Marco's team providing cover fire as the mercenaries scrambled to pull their boss from the burning wreck. They reached the SUVs and piled in. As they sped away, looking back at the inferno reflecting off the river, Lorenzo started to laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had cheated the Reaper. He turned to Elena, grabbing her face with both hands. You are incredible, he said, the adrenaline crashing into something else. You read them perfectly. How did you know about the signature requirement? Elena froze. The excitement of the battle drained away, replaced by the cold dread of her secret. She had slipped again. Knowing about union laws and syndicate takeover protocols wasn't something a waitress or even a soldier would know. That was Don-level knowledge. I watched a documentary, she said weakly. Lorenzo stared at her. The laughter died in his throat. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. He looked deep into her eyes, and this time Elena saw the pieces clicking together in his mind. The combat skills, the tactical awareness, the knowledge of the Underworld codes. "Stop lying to me," Lorenzo whispered, his face inches from hers. "I know you're not Elena the waitress. I don't know who you are yet, but I will find out." He leaned closer, his lips brushing hers. It wasn't a kiss, but a promise. "And when I do, I hope for your sake that you are not my enemy." He pulled back, leaving her breathless and terrified. Elena looked down at her hands. They were stained with soot and grease. She had saved him, and in doing so, she had doomed herself. Lorenzo picked up his phone. "Marco," he said into the line, "get the private investigator back on the line. I want a deep dive on the Rossi family. Go back 50 years. Look for connections to Sicily. Look for connections to the Genovese." Elena's blood ran cold. He was looking in the right place. The car sped into the night, carrying them away from the fire, but driving them straight toward a truth that would burn everything down. The silence in the penthouse was suffocating. Lorenzo emerged from his private study, a manila folder in his hand, and a look of cold betrayal in his eyes. He threw the file onto the coffee table. Photographs spilled out an old black-and-white picture of a mob boss, a birth certificate, and a surveillance shot of a young girl at a mafia funeral. "I asked who you were," Lorenzo said, his voice deadly quiet. "You said a survivor. You left out the part about being royalty." He pointed to the photo of the old man. "Don Salvo Genovese, the man who tried to wipe my family off the map. You are his granddaughter. You are the enemy." Elena stood up, her heart pounding. "I am not my grandfather. I ran away from that life 10 years ago. I scrubbed my name to keep my brother safe from people like you." "Or maybe you were waiting," Lorenzo countered, stepping closer, "hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to finish what Don Salvo started." He drew his gun, holding it at his side. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't put a bullet in you right now. You are a wolf in my home." "I saved your life," Elena shouted, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. 3 times if I wanted you dead, I would have let O'Malley shoot you." She stepped forward, closing the distance until she was chest to chest with him. She took his hand, the one holding the gun, and raised it until the cold barrel pressed against her forehead. "If you think I'm the enemy," she whispered, staring straight into his storm-grey eyes. "Then pull the trigger. Do it. Finish the war." Lorenzo froze. He stared at her, his finger resting on the trigger guard. He looked for deceit, but he found only the same steel he saw in the mirror. He realized that the woman who had fought back-to-back with him in the alley wasn't a spy. She was his equal. With a growl of frustration, he lowered the gun and holstered it. He grabbed the back of her neck and pulled her into a bruising, desperate kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision of 2 violent worlds, finding a truce. The moment was shattered by the shrill ring of Lorenzo's satellite phone. He answered it, his face draining of color. "When?" he demanded. He listened for a second, then hung up, looking at Elena with pure fear. "The accountant," Lorenzo said hollowly. "The meeting at the Navy Yard was a distraction. They found the estate in the Hamptons. They've breached the perimeter. My mother and Leo are trapped in the panic room." Elena felt a cold, deadly calm wash over her. The waitress vanished. The frightened sister vanished. In their place, the Genovese bloodline returned. She walked to the tactical bag on the table and pulled out an AR-15 rifle. She checked the chamber, the metallic clack-clack echoing in the silent room. "Get the helicopter," she commanded, her voice possessing an authority that made Lorenzo straighten up. "Marco!" Lorenzo yelled, sprinting for the door. "Prep the bird. We leave in 2 minutes." Elena slung the rifle over her shoulder. her eyes dark and void of mercy. "They made a mistake, Lorenzo." "What mistake?" "They touched my family," she said, "and for that I will burn their world down." The flight to the Hamptons was a blur of dread. Below them, the sprawling Moretti estate was an inferno, flames licking the roof of the main house, while tracers zipped through the darkness like angry hornets. "Put us down on the lawn," Lorenzo ordered. As the helicopter touched down, Elena and Lorenzo leaped out into the chaos. Bullets chewed up the turf around them. "They're breaching the panic room," Lorenzo roared, firing at the mercenaries, suppressing the west wing. Elena scanned the battlefield. She spotted him immediately, the accountant standing by the pool house, safely directing his troops via a tablet. He was the head. Cut it off, and the body dies. "Cover me!" Elena shouted. She sprinted toward the pool house, ignoring the heat. Spotting a gas line near the pool heater, she fired 2 shots. The first punctured the pipe. The second ignited the gas. Whoosh! A wall of fire erupted, separating the accountant from his bodyguards. Elena vaulted through the flames, tackling the accountant and pressing her gun to his chin. "Call them off!" she screamed. "Kill me and a dead man's, which triples their pay." The accountant sneered, blood trickling from his forehead. "They will kill everyone." Elena holstered her gun and pulled a serrated combat knife from her boot. She played her final card. "Then I invoke the code of Justinian. Elena Genovese, I challenge your claim to this territory. Single combat." The accountant froze. It was an ancient syndicate law that hadn't been used in decades, but he couldn't refuse a blood heir. "Accepted," he said, drawing a curved karambit blade. The mercenaries ceased fire. The lawn went silent. The accountant struck first, his blade slicing Elena's collarbone. She grit her teeth, stepping into his guard rather than away. As he lunged again, she trapped his wrist, spun him around, and drove her a knife deep into his shoulder artery. The accountant fell. The duel was over. "The contract is void," Elena shouted at the mercenaries. Leaderless and beaten by the code, the soldiers melted back into the night. Moments later, the panic room door swung open. A terrified Leo ran out, followed by Lorenzo's mother. Elena fell to her knees, hugging her brother tight. Tears finally washing away the soot on her face. Lorenzo watched them, realizing that the woman who had saved his life had just saved his soul. 1 year later. Vino and Veritas was more opulent than ever. The bullet holes were gone, replaced by silk and gold. Lorenzo Moretti sat at table 4, but he wasn't alone. Elena sat beside him, wearing emerald silk and a diamond ring that caught the light. She was no longer the waitress serving the wine. She was the partner ruling the empire. The captains of the 5 families raised their glasses. The union of the Moretti and Genovese bloodlines had brought an era of unprecedented peace. "To the future," Elena said, her voice commanding the room. "To the Queen," Lorenzo whispered, kissing her hand. Elena smiled, took a sip of the vintage Barolo, and set her glass down. She picked up her silver fork and placed it on her napkin, perfectly parallel to the knife. All is well. And that, my friends, is the story of how a single fork placement changed the underworld forever. Elena proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun. It's intelligence, loyalty, and the courage to act when everyone else freezes. She went from serving the wine to ruling the table, reminding us all that we are more than the labels people put on us. If you enjoyed this twist-filled mafia romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. If you were in Elena's shoes at the restaurant, would you have given the signal or would you have run for the exit? Let me know your answer in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.